Good morning, my dear ones. Won't you pray with me? Loving God, we want so badly to make plain the hearts of this congregation, so that in there some likeness we might see. To make plain the things that we carry inside, to drink in the love of this congregation and all those present on the call this morning. To take the muddy, heavy emotions that we carry and surrender them to you, our rock and our Redeemer. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable in your sight. Amen. So, until I started hanging around with people from the Midwestern United States, I had no idea how many different kinds of apologies there were. Being from a region of this country famed for its utter unfamiliarity with the idea of shame, Southern California, I just did not know, for instance, that there is the apology that you make when somebody else steps on your foot. There is the apology that you make when you are voicing your opinion about where you would like to have lunch. There is the apology that you make after voicing any opinion at all. Now, these were all kind of small potatoes compared to the apology that you make when in polite company. Perhaps the company of your Midwestern family, your spouse, forgets themselves and with hapless and innocent abandon, lets out a sound of deep satisfaction that some people might call a very loud belch. Now, in fact, I have to admit that in my relating this to you all, in recasting your nascent minister as an unrepentant belcher, I know that was a thinly veiled story, but that was me. I did that. I'm sorry. I think I might owe you all an apology. See, I just did it just then. But I will not. I refuse, and I will not. God forgive me, but I will burp loudly, and I will burp right here and right now, if only to insist that in our gospel reading for today, God is, in some ways, reminding us that we do not have to apologize for our bodies. Now, this is not to say that I am encouraging, for example, superfluous flatulence during a moment of peaceful silence, but I would say that God is interested in our bodies, not in our polite bodies, but interested in the messiness of our human bodies. And what I want to assert today is that our scripture is a story of God moving ever closer to us and moving deeper into love with the messiness of our bodies. A love that burns even brighter in moments of despair. Now, because this is my first sermon, I do want to start small. So before I explain anything else, I want to talk about the mystery of the Incarnation. I'm joking. But, we are still getting to know one another, so I will start by saying something relatively uncontroversial about Jesus. That Jesus came to live among us in order to learn what it's like to be one of us, to be with us in our brokenness, to be with us in our sorrow, to be with us in our hope and our joy. It might also be worth noting here that Jesus came among us not in just any body, but in a body born to a people whose homeland had been pillaged over and over again, whose temples had been knocked down to stones, whose poetry talks of teeth reduced to dust from want, a people who were, at the very moment of our story, under the thumb of a worldwide empire. And it is in this moment and to this colonial power that Jesus understands that he will surrender his body. But now this isn't a surprise. Through the whole of his ministry, Jesus has been heading toward the cross and telling his followers as much. Yet now, looking straight into the bloody reality that awaits him, seeing in clear detail the thorns and the spear, he is maybe surprised to find that on the top of the Mount of Olives, he has found a moment that in some ways is every bit as painful as the actual crucifixion. So in the Gospel of Mark and Matthew, we get parallel accounts of this garden story. Here it's the Mount of Olives. There it's sometimes referred to as the Garden of Gethsemane. In those accounts, Jesus tells his friends who have traipsed up the mountain with him, at Jesus' invitation, I might add, something that in our Luke account we actually don't get. They just sort of follow him. Jesus says to his friends, "My soul is sorrowed, my soul is grieved unto death." For chapter upon chapter, remember, Jesus has been telling us what awaits him, that the forces of evil will assail him, will win his body. And even with 33 years of preparation, I again wonder if this moment doesn't take him by surprise. Standing on the edge of the inevitable and unimaginable pain about to befall him, I wonder if Jesus isn't learning something incredible. In this moment, Jesus is learning how the body tells the soul about pain. That the acuity of our imagination can create out of fear a mark on our bodies. And that this mark can be so deep, can feel so real, that it can penetrate the here and now, and it can pass beyond the mortal realm and into the soul. My soul is sorrowed unto death. Now, depending on which version you read, we see Christ's soul experiencing either grief or sorrow. But of course, in the original Greek, the word is lupeo. And if we turn back to today's gospel, the gospel we've been talking about throughout Lent and before, in Luke's version of this story, it's not Jesus' soul which is caught in the experience of lupeo, but rather this is the word used to explain his companion's fatigue. This detail is in fact unique to Luke's account, that when Jesus returns to the disciples who have followed him, again unbidden, up the Mount of Olives, they are asleep not because the body is simply vulnerable, but because the body is vulnerable to sorrow. Oftentimes, we tend to come back to this chestnut of like the Keystone disciples. They're these bumblers who follow Jesus around Galilee trying to figure out which end of the donkey is up. And indeed, right after they come down from the Mount of Olives, there will come one of my favorite moments of the New Testament when Judas shows up with the Pharisees to arrest Jesus. And the disciples say, "Jesus, what should we do? Should we strike them with swords?" And in the very next verse, no discussion, no nothing, somebody just cuts off an ear, and then Jesus has to heal them. It's this whole thing. And I really love these stories because they remind me that Jesus' followers were human, that Jesus himself was human. But this isn't really one of those times. Jesus always makes himself plain, but he never compels his followers to do anything. It's like this moment when he finds them asleep at exactly the wrong time. He says, "Please stay awake. I would prefer you awake." But having just experienced the sorrow that grieves the soul, he gets it. He sees the same sorrow working on them. And he doesn't rebuke them. He just reminds them that things are going to get hard, that prayer will make it easier. And in many ways, that's the simple truth of this passage, that, like we say each and every Sunday before we begin worship, our mission is to love God and to love people because love changes everything. And the best way to do that is to listen and to tell the truth. Even when the truth looks something like this: my soul is sorrowed unto death. In this passage, the more famous line is Jesus expressing his most fervent desire: please let this cup pass. Let me continue to live among my people. And to give him the strength to understand this intolerable reality, God sends Jesus an angel. And the way it happens is a little surprising. The angel shows up. The angel strengthens Jesus. And rather than getting up and going about his business and becoming not sad anymore, the strength is something that sends Jesus deeper into prayer. In fact, this angel gives us the only mention in the entire New Testament of sweat. I don't know about you guys, but for me, sweat is a very important part of having a human body. Not only is it our only mention of sweat that we get, mind you, it is our only mention of Jesus sweating. And not only is it Jesus sweating, but Jesus' sweat courses down his body like blood, which for the people of ancient Israel would have been symbolic of one's very life force being poured out. So to recap, we've got some lexical ambiguity happening, which is another way of saying that in this passage, words, namely strength, seems to be taking on a new meaning. That this angel is giving Jesus a kind of strength that pours out his life force in, and follow me here, the funkiest way possible. When I say funk, what I mean is to say it in my deepest and most unctuous voice, because the funk that we're talking about here, this sweat, is a primordial force. It grabs the stomach and it tugs the heart back through the pulsing tohu vabohu of Genesis, the primordial soup, in other words. It is the thing that makes your skin cry out in one way or another, be it in words or in sweat, for life. Now, as I was reading this, I kept thinking, should we be here? I mean, Jesus has retreated a stone's throw away from even his trusty, albeit bumbling, followers. Maybe Jesus needs his space. But yet here we are, deep in this most intimate moment of grievance between Jesus and his Maker. But we stay. We stay and we bear witness with all the grace we can summon, because to let somebody know the breadth of your sorrow is one of the most loving things that you can do. It is like telling the truth, but in some ways, it's deeper than the truth. It's like the old expression, don't let them see you sweat, except it's exactly the opposite of that. In fact, it's a close cousin to the idea that the best way to show somebody that you love them is to tell them the truth. To tell them the truth that surpasses words, the truth that is so pressing it comes out through your pores. To see Jesus in this moment may feel like we're looking in on him, but I am here to tell you that in some very important ways the lens turns around. That it is this moment where Jesus, our Creator, taken on flesh, is taught what it is like to be human. To see an intolerable reality moving inexorably forward into being. And here's the good news. That the head of our church in this moment insists on the truth. Insists on letting the truth out over and over and saying that if you continue to tell the truth, there is nothing nothing that can separate you from the love of God. And if the truth feels far away, then luckily we have our messy, blessed bodies, fearfully and wonderfully made to lead us back to love, to follow the sweat to that within us that is God. Not that which is made in the image of God, but that which is God. I am speaking, of course, about the thing within us which lupeo, which grief, which sorrow marks but never destroys. And perhaps that is the best news of all. That no mark on the soul, no kind of lupeo can ever make us unlovable to those who truly know us. And I want to tell you that it is God who knows you. Now, I began my sermon today by poking fun both at my wife and her people, and so for that I'm going to ask for forgiveness. A questionable decision, but for the first sermon, you got to start somewhere. Plus, this sermon has been about honesty, so I should tell you in truth that elsewhere in the New Testament we also find the word lupeo meaning not sorrow, not grief, but